Chris here, taking a look at a mini PC that you can buy from Banggood. It's got an 11th gen Core i7 1165G7 with Iris Xe graphics, the 96 executional units. Now it's in a very small compact size. It can run 3 displays at 4K 60 and one of them at 4K 120Hz because it does support Thunderbolt 4, which is great to see around the €600 price point. But is the mini PC any good? That's of course what I'm here to find out. This model does come pre-configured with 16GB of RAM, but it's just a single stick that they have used. There are 2 SODIMM slots, thankfully, so we could add more RAM to put it into dual channel at least. But the RAM spec they went with, they kind of cheaped out a bit because it's not the correct speed. It's a little too slow. It has a 512GB SATA 3 SSD and Wi-Fi AC, which can be also upgraded. Included with our mini PC, you'll find a user manual. It's in English and Chinese. It's very basic, just goes over what the ports do really. You'll find a power supply, and this one's rated to 65 watts, DC plug. We do have an HDMI cable, EU power cable, some screws for an internal SATA 3 drive, and for this, which is our VESA mounting bracket. On the underside of this mini PC, you'll find an intake vent. We've got 4 rubber feet, and the fan noise and the thermals I'll let you know later on in this review. There are 2 mounting point screws there for the VESA bracket. This is plastic, the bottom of it. The lid here too, that is made out of plastic for the wireless antenna reception, I believe is why they have done that. Up the front, so the metal around the outside here is brushed, it's just an alloy. We've got a power button, status LED, 3.5mm combo jack, USB 2 of them, and then 2 USB 3s, and an exit vent right here. So that's where the hot air is being pushed out on the left side of it. And here we do have 3 displays that it can run, which is really good. So Thunderbolt 4, great to see this here. We've got our DisplayPort 1.4, and then HDMI 2.0. Now it's an HDMI 2.0 port, unfortunately not HDMI 2.1. However, I can run 4K 120Hz with my LG CX OLED TV, which is good. 2 USB 3 ports, gigabit LAN, and then our power in. There are 2 screws here that if you undo those, you can lift off the top lid, and we'll take a look at the internals now. Now they did cheap out a little bit with the RAM and especially the speed. So we've got 16GB, which is great, but it's only 2666 megahertz. And of course, this supports 3.2 megahertz, and we really need it to be in dual channel as well. So I will swap this out just because I want to see the full potential of this mini PC. But bear that in mind with this review, the stats and the benchmarks and everything you're going to see are going to be in dual channel configuration with the faster RAM, because they've completely crippled it here by doing so, because the Iris Xe graphics, especially with the 96 executional units, needs dual channel and it needs the proper RAM speed, which this simply isn't. So that's really poor by them to do this. And when they've also installed here a SATA 3 SSD and not an NVMe one. Right here you'll find the wireless antennas, and just under this, that is the Intel Wireless AC 3165, very common. It's not a great chipset. It used to be good, but we're on Wi-Fi 6 spec now. So I would upgrade this with an AX200 or 201 to give you Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5 support. This card only has Bluetooth 4.2, I believe it is. So this will be the RAM I'm using, 2 sticks of 8GB, and it's Micron RAM, and it is rated to the 3200 megahertz, which is the maximum the chipset supports, and because I've got 2, it's going to be in dual channel. And you can see the SATA 3 drive will be installed right here, 2.5 inch, but we did not get the cable needed in order to connect it to the motherboard. The plug's right there for SATA 3, but it's not included in the box. That's another letdown. So they've cheaped out on so many things here. The RAM, the wireless card, and not even giving us the cable for a 2.5 inch SATA drive. And here's our BIOS. It's not too bad. We do get some advanced settings. So when you go into it, you'll see right here that we can change at least the power limit. Not that I would really want to mess around with this. You can set it to 35. This is the only options they give us. But it will, of course, be louder. It's already loud enough as it is. And it will generate a lot more heat. I always support that set to Win 10. I mean, you can't change that. And then you've got a few other things that you can tweak in here. So minor settings, not everything, because normally you see a lot more than this. If it was completely unlocked, it would have a huge array of settings that we can tweak. Oh, and this one here at the top. This is handy if you want to dedicate more RAM to that Iris Xe graphics. You could set that to max, which I won't do. I'll just leave it at the default there. And here we are in Windows. So it just went straight into Windows. There was no setup to go through. Someone's already done that before. And I don't particularly like this. I like to go through the setup process and not have it already done. I can even see recent files where the drivers they were installing this from looks like a USB pen drive. And of course, I can't access that or anything. So I will probably end up factory resetting this, but it is running Windows 11 Pro, sorry, as you can see. And it does tell me that it is actually activated. So I don't know whether that's valid or not. I have to assume that it is. Activation does seem to be legit there. Activation state with a digital license. So I do believe that that should hold up. That'll be fine. So apart from that, everything seems to be fine here. Now, when you take a look at the CPU there, you're going to see it listed, of course, 8 times because it has 8 threads. Now, the maximum turbo of this is 4.7 and it's a 10 nanometer chip. I'll just bring up HW info, what I've got here, just to show you a little bit more info on this. So we have Tiger Lake graphics, which is great. Okay, that's a very potent integrated GPU there, and it has the 96 executional units. But what I'm not too happy about is this. It is in fact a QS, so it's a engineering sample, a quality sample, and they should not be using this because it's not actually a final version of the chip. Now, I've encountered no problems with that, at least, but you could run into problems if they use this certain early versions, especially of the chipsets, might not even show up the name correctly. This one is, or they might not go up to their correct turbos because they were early test units, engineering samples. So not good at all to see that. However, I can report that the performance does seem to be fine here. You can see it's getting very good scores here. So single core score over 1500 points, multi-core score over 5000 there. And the UI and everything does feel very quick and snappy. But mind you, I am running that RAM that I showed you that I installed. So 16 gigabytes, however, in dual channel as it should be. Most importantly, the correct speed, 3200 megahertz. I've also tested out Cinebench here, R23, and it is pulling through similar scores to what we see actually in Geekbench 5. So going over 5,000 points for multi-core score and single-core score just over 1,400. So it is a powerful chipset that is within this. However, the original configuration with only having 16 gigabytes and a single stick and only 2,666 megahertz will severely affect the performance. That's why I've got the RAM in dual channel, because I want to see the peak temperatures, peak performance too, that we can get out of this chipset. Now that boot drive is partitioned in dual partition, so C drive and D drive. I don't know why they do this. It could be if you do a factory reset, you're going to still have your files that you do have on D drive will be intact. They won't be wiped out if you do that. Could be their reasoning behind it, but I don't particularly like this. And the speeds of that drive, well, not super quick, but for SATA 3, it's fine. Okay, they're all right kind of speeds there. But you can use a PCIe 3.0 drive if you wanted much quicker than this. You can use something like a Samsung 970 Evo Plus to get over 3,500 megabytes per second sequential reads and writes. One other benchmark too, and this is the 3D Mark Firestrike score. So over 4,000 for Iris Xe graphics is kind of what I do expect. I have seen a little higher, so around about 4,500, 4,400, but it's not actually too bad here. And for integrated graphics, believe it or not, this score's not actually bad. And how does the Core i7 handle something like this, which is a Jellyfish 4K test file here, HEVC 10-bit, 140 megabits per second. Initially does one little stutter there, but that's smooth, okay? That's not dropping any frames at all. This is Iris Xe. It's going to handle this really well because it has the 96 executional units. And of course, this is all native decoding. It's been like that for quite some time now, I think since the 7th gen. 4K 60. This is the Sony Swordsmith file. And that is smooth. That's looking very good. I just skip ahead there. And that's playing that back at 60 frames per second, as I would expect for Iris Xe graphics. Now, multitasking, it does handle everything well. I won't go into just general kind of use like documents, spreadsheets, and things like that, but here I do have a spreadsheet open with LibreOffice, and even though it's quite a few pages, 700 records, it's fine, okay? It's, well, one page here. It's able to do all those kind of things. Like light computing, I won't cover all of that. Google, all that runs fine. However, let's take a look at 4K 60 streaming. Will it choke doing that in Chrome? Here we go, Chrome is open. I can hear the fan quite a bit, so you might be able to hear that in the background. It is getting a little loud here and a little bit annoying. So this is the one I will test out, Costa Rica. That's normally the clip that I test. So I should set these stats on. And we'll take a look at this, of course, in 4K. Skip ahead. And 4K 60, full screen. This should not drop any frames, but it is. It's constantly dropping frames. See that? Now, if you do the same in Edge, it won't be as bad. So although it looks like it's quite steady, it is in fact a little choppy because look, it's 10, 20, about 20 frames every second that is dropped from 4K 60. Now 4K 30, on the other hand, is fine. It can handle that streaming without any problems. 4K video editing, can it do it? Can it handle it? So for basic edits, the kind of edits that I do, yes, it's able to handle this. But remember, I'm running this RAM, the 16 gigabytes in dual channel, at the, well, the speed that you should be running them at, which is 3200 megahertz. So the timeline with the playback resolution set to a quarter from the 4K with these 4K 100 megabit clips is okay. It's sometimes a little bit laggy, but overall you can, yes, do an edit like this. Basic edits, and 1080p will be absolutely fine with Adobe Premiere Pro. So what I'll do now is test out our export times. So this is to go over to the export YouTube preset, and that's down here, 4K. All right, and I'll set now 1 minute of footage. We'll see how long it's going to take. Start on the export and then start on the timer. There's a little bit of a delay there. And it looks like it is going to take under 1 minute. We'll skip ahead and I'll show you the end result, but this is quite quick. I mean, we've got Iris Xe graphics with the 96 executional units. That really helps out. All right, it has just a few seconds left now, and you'll see that most of the work is the Iris Xe graphics doing all the heavy lifting there at 96% load. And it's going to disappear. All right, you can say, because I took 2 seconds or so to get over to the timer, about 52 seconds for 1 minute of 4K footage. That's good. Anything that's under a minute, I think is great. It's not the fastest I've seen, but it's still not bad. Now for gaming performance, this is GTA 5, which yes, is an old title, and I do have it set to 1080p on what I would call the medium settings. So that's the traffic and population density in the middle. So I could lower it down even further, and we're looking around 40 frames per second. So with the Iris Xe graphics, I've certainly seen a lot better. So why is it not performing as it could? Well, that's because we do end up running into some thermal throttling that's taking place, and that is affecting the performance, lowering down the clocks a little bit. And lastly, for my game test, this is The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, and I've got it set on low settings, 720p is the resolution, and it's playable, just. You can see some tearing, a little bit of lag at times. Now, I'm in the city, which is worst case scenario, really, with a lot of NPCs around, a lot to render. Out in the countryside, you'll get a higher frame rate of around 50 frames per second average. At the moment, it's struggling to get over 40, but yes, it is playable, and that's the main thing, and good for integrated graphics. But it could perform a little better. Again, I just think there's a bit of throttling going on. And finally, our thermals. So I can see why it does throttle in games, because this happens. It will peak at 97 degrees Celsius, or around 95. That's triggering thermal throttling. It lowers down the clocks, affecting the performance. And the fan noise, well, it does get a little loud. That's another one of the cons with this mini PC, is the fan noise can be just annoying at times, cycling on and off. It's on most of the time, the fan. It's only when you're just doing barely anything that it's very low and you can hardly hear it, but it never lasts for long. Then it comes on again. Now, power use at the wall with my wall meter, I am seeing about 62.5 watts maximum. and then an idle of around 8 to 9 watts. And Linux, yes, it can run Linux. I did a quick install and tested it out. You'll be able to boot it up just fine, and everything does seem to work. And it's using an older Wi-Fi chip in this. So all up, it's a bit of a disappointing model. They cheaped out on the parts. They put slower spec RAM in, which is 2,666 megahertz, not 3.2 gigahertz. So they use the slower speed. It's only in single channel. And they should have really put 2 sticks of 8 gigabytes in this dual channel, and of course the correct spec of RAM to get the performance I did show you in this review. So bear that in mind, that if you get one of these, it's going to perform or underperform and not be anywhere near what I showed you. I just showed you the potential that this does have at least. So Banggood should be selling this as, I believe, a bare bones model. So you can put your own RAM in it and your own SSD. It does support PCIe 3.0 spec, at least NVMe, so we can have a faster SSD. Now, there was no cable either for the SATA 3 2.5-inch drive bay, so I don't know where to get that from. I guess maybe hunt it down on AliExpress if you wanted to run a secondary drive in this. And the wireless card is only Wi-Fi 5 spec. It should be Wi-Fi 6, so you can also upgrade that. The Intel AX200 or AX201 cards do sell for around about $15 US, maybe even cheaper than that. So it's a quick and very easy upgrade to swap it over and plug in the antennas with it. The fan noise is another con there too. It can get a little bit loud, as we saw. So it has potential. It is a very fast mini PC from what I've shown you. It's just really the way they've configured it is not good. They cut some corners there. So I hope to see Banggood listing this a little bit cheaper, but as a bare bones model, I think would be best for everyone, or just sell it with the correct spec of RAM and 2 sticks of RAM in it would be ideal. So thanks a lot for watching my review here of the MU05. It's from a brand called NVISEN, and you can pick it up from Banggood for around about €600 at the time of this video.